Cootie and I have been procrastinating on making this video for well over a year now, and we decided that it just can't wait any longer. Due to recent events, this video is now more relevant than ever before. Now ask yourself this question: if you had not seen the title, do you think that you'd be able to guess what the general theme of this video is, just based on what you see in front of you? I hope so, because this is what violence really looks like. This is the heart and soul of violence. Cootie, the mystical rodent activist, says that if you can clearly see what violence is, then that also makes it easy to see what violence is not. I would like to think that we speak a common language, and I would hope that we all know a little bit more about the nature of violence than just to know that it's a bad thing. In light of the UN's attempts to crack down on so-called cyber violence against women, I've decided that now would be a good time to punch back against this language abuse. These social engineers have no respect for the English language. It's almost Orwellian the way that they're willing to distort and destroy language. The pen is mightier than the sword. In order to guard against this attack on the English language, I thought that it would be a good idea to talk about violence and take a stab at defining it, or give it my best shot, in a way that will frustrate those who want to apply the term to everything that they don't like. And this is what I came up with. My definition of violence requires two criteria to be satisfied. Violence can be either active or passive, but it must have both a violent outcome and serve a violent purpose. If you have a violent outcome but no violent purpose, then you don't have violence. If you have a violent purpose but no violent outcome, then you don't have violence. Both the outcome and the purpose are necessary conditions, but neither is sufficient alone for violence, according to my definition. So what is a violent outcome? According to my definition of violence, violence must result in either death, physical injury, or physical pain. And what is a violent purpose? In order for a purpose to be violent, the violent outcome must be used in order to punish, to protect, or to empower some entity. Notice how there is nothing wrong with either of these motives in and of themselves. What's wrong with protecting yourself or empowering yourself? What's wrong with punishment? Surely some people deserve to be punished, don't they? Through examining the somewhat closely related purposes of violence, it's easy to see why we have this hypocritical, ambivalent, love-hate relationship with violence, why we have an addiction to violence, why we always justify it and make excuses for it, and why it's so difficult to put a stop to violence. Violence is both acceptable and unacceptable, righteous and evil. We want to punish those who deserve to be punished. We want to empower those who deserve more power. And we want to protect those who need protection. Those are all violent motives. For most of us, violence is only seen as wrong when we're protecting, punishing, or empowering the wrong people. We allow for violent self-defense, we allow police to use violence, and we allow the military to use violence. Whether violence is justified or not, criminal or not, moral or not, it's important to agree on what is and is not violence. Only violence is violence. I would say that not all destruction is violence, and not all danger is violence. A tornado can seem very violent, but it doesn't actually have a violent purpose, for example. And what about vandalism or destruction of property? I would say no, that's not violence. What about threats of violence? No. Threatening violence is not violence. If that was violence, then consider this. What would a threat to threaten violence be? How about a threat to threaten violence? If you think that a threat of violence is also violence, then you can substitute terms and call it all violence. such that threatening to threaten violence would also be violence. You see, it doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. What about provoking violence or promoting violence? Is that violence? No. It is one thing to claim that smoking causes cancer, but it does not follow that smoking is cancer. What about emotional violence? There's no such thing. That's just a metaphor for cruelty and competitiveness. You can have emotional pain and emotional injury, but let's not abuse the term violence with these metaphors. What about self-defense? I think that self-defense can be violent or non-violent, whether it's justified or not. What about self-harm or suicide? Yes, I think that suicide is violence. Not everything that is wrong or harmful is necessarily violence, and not everything that is violence is necessarily wrong or harmful. What about catcalling? No. What about BDSM? No, that's mock violence. What about ultimate fighting? I don't think so. Not really. The UFC is very artificial. The fighters are not really trying to punish each other. They're not really fighting for their lives or as a preemptive strike against a potential physical threat. They do not actually gain any real power over their opponent if they win. Their goal is not really to kill, injure, or inflict pain on their opponent. These fighters really just want to do whatever it takes to win the match, just for the pride, the money, and the fame. And it just so happens that in order to win the match, the actions that they must take in the ring will look exactly like real violence. But it's probably not real violence. It's probably simulated violence, and for the most part, the UFC is just like any other sport, except that it's been engineered to resemble real violence as closely as possible. Is calling someone fat violence? No. Is scaring someone violence? No. Is attempted violence violence? No. Is sexual assault violence? Now this is where things get interesting. Think of an example of sexual assault. Now, does this example meet the criteria for violence that I've spelled out? It might or it might not. That depends on what you have in mind. When viewed through a feminist lens, all examples of sexual assault would be violence because, according to the feminist perspective, sexual assault by definition is always about power and punishment, and because they equate emotional pain with physical pain. When we define sexual assault as a form of violence, we are greatly expanding the definition of violence. This allows you to consider a kiss or a hug to be interpreted as examples of violent behavior. Sexual violence is one of those weird oxymoronic words like true lies, hateful love, or pleasurable pain. This is just one of the many ways that we have allowed our concept of violence to become diluted. Having said that, there are plenty of examples of sexual assault that would also count as violence according to my narrow definition of violence. But it's important to keep in mind that just because something is wrong doesn't make it violent, and just because something is violent doesn't make it wrong. For example, if I snuck into your room, stole your diary, and read it, that would be wrong, but it wouldn't be violence. There is a problem that I'm trying to combat here. It's the loss of vocabulary. It seems as though all that matters is that we describe bad things with negative terms and good things with positive terms. Abstract concepts that dare to go beyond the binary, pejorative, or complimentary connotation don't seem to have very much pull on people. Things are either good or ungood, double plus good or double plus ungood. Anita Sarkeesian, what is she? The unwomen like her. She's good. So if Davis Aurini says that Anita Sarkeesian is ungood, then what does that make Davis Aurini? Ungood. So then how should you describe Davis Aurini? Davis Aurini is ungood. Violence is also ungood. So does that mean that Davis Aurini is violent? Yes. Davis Aurini is violent because violence is ungood and Davis Aurini is also ungood. Therefore, Davis Aurini and violence are the same. We now have the language of emotional valence and social relationships. What else do we need to describe the world? Abstract concepts are so last year.